Why is more effective water governance is needed? Let us see prominent reasons. First reason is reducing availability of water resources in India. India ranks 13th for overall water stress and has more than 3 times the population of the other 17 extremely highly stressed countries combined. Niti Aayog's finding that the country is suffering from worst water crisis in its history and millions of lives and livelihood are under threat confirms the extent of the crisis. Currently, 600 million Indians face high extreme water stress and about 2 lakh people die every year due to inadequate access to safe water and sanitation. The water crisis in India is the result of both natural factors and human actions. Along with the growing population, failure of the monsoon, desertification and recurring droughts bring water related miseries to a different part of the country. Another reason is growing demand for water. India's overall population is expected to increase to 1.5 billion by 2030 and 1.7 billion by 2050. With a growing population, unregulated and insufficient water use, depletion of the groundwater, water pollution and uncertainty associated with the climate change, India is probably marching towards a much bigger problem. The best estimate indicate that India's overall water demand by 2030 will exceed supply by 2-fold, with severe water scarcity putting the lives of hundreds of millions at the risk. Water quality degradation is another aspect. Widespread pollution of the surface and groundwater is affecting the quality. Geogenic contaminants like arsenic, fluoride, uranium, iron and salinity are posing problems across the country. Human sources are responsible for the presence of nitrate and organic pollutants in the groundwater. Management of the water resources is another prime reason necessitating the need for better governance. It is said that India's water crisis is not so much due to an absolute shortage of the water, but primarily because of misallocation, flawed and outdated management practices and regulations, and the lack of proper conservation of existing resources. For example, over 80% of our freshwater resources are being used for irrigation, where the bulk of the wastage and mismanagement lie. Besides, agriculture is behind the unsustainable withdrawal of groundwater, widespread nitrate contamination of groundwater, and presence of pesticides and high nutrient content in surface water bodies. Whereas cities and factories are responsible for water pollution through domestic and industrial uses in urban areas. Paradoxically, India is among the largest net exporter of virtual water and has one of the most water intensive economy. Despite looming water scarcity, India is one of the largest water user per unit of GDP. It suggests that how India manages its scarce water resources account for much of its water use. Water disputes also complicate water management in India. Water disputes or conflict is a term to describe a dispute between countries, states or groups over access to water resources. These disputes arise for several reasons, including territorial disputes, a fight for resources, or strategic advantage. These disputes occur both between and within nations own both over freshwater and seawater. Major underlying reasons for these disputes include low rainfall, inadequate water supply, and dependency on one major water source, high population growth and rapid urbanization, modernization and industrialization, and a history of armed combat and poor relation between countries and among groups within the countries. Water scarcity alone, however, is infrequently the case of armed dispute over water. Immediately participating causes include socio-political tensions, dispute over dam, reservoirs and other large-scale projects, and dispute concerning environmental and resource issues. There are three major linkages between dispute and water shortage or water crisis. Access to adequate water supply is the first one. Water livelihood loss and civil is another one. Water management and dispute is the third one. Let us try to understand transnational water dispute of India. India's riparian neighbors include China, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan. Between India and Bangladesh, the issue has been primarily over the sharing of water of Ganga River and Tista River. This conflict was resolved by Ganga Water Treaty of 1996. The dispute between India and Pakistan, which started at the time of partition as a water sharing issue, became and continues as a tense relationship over control and security. Negotiations over the sharing of Indus water started and resulted in Indus Water Treaty of 1960s, allocating the three western rivers Indus, Chenab and Jhelum to Pakistan and three eastern rivers Ravi, Beas and Satluj to India. This treaty permits India to build run-of-the-river hydroelectrical projects on the western rivers, but these provisions are hemmed in with stringent conditions and restrictions to ensure that Pakistan is protected from stoppage of flow or harmful flooding. India tries to utilize the permissive provisions to full and Pakistan tries to apply the restrictive provisions stringently. The two countries thus pull in opposite directions, leading to a permanent tug of war in Indus Commission. Dispute between India and Nepal started in 1950s with Kosi and Gandak agreements. The Kosi and Gandak agreements, initially signed in 1954 and 1955 respectively, were amended some years later to address Nepal's concerns, but the sense of grievance was not wholly removed. In 1996, Mahakali Treaty was signed but caught up in the complexity of the bilateral relationships. There is no transboundary water issues between India and Bhutan. There is a cooperation on the hydroelectrical projects, mainly for the supply of electricity to India, which has been fairly non-problematic. Now let us see India and China part. The India and China case also presents another set of the potentially thorny problems. Reports suggest that China has diverted the Brahmaputra river's water northward. However, there is no much information in the public domain about what is happening or is likely to happen from Indian side. India's transboundary river water disputes with its South Asian riparian neighbors are likely to escalate in the coming years due to widening of the demand and supply gaps in respective countries. I am sure that you have seen some of these pictures indicating the interstate water disputes in India. As most of the rivers in country are interstate, the regulation and development of waters of these rivers are a source of interstate differences and disputes. The interstate river water disputes are one of the most combative issues in Indian federalism today. According to Article 262, in case of disputes relating to water, Parliament may by law provides for the adjunction of any dispute or complaint with respect to the use, distribution or control of the water of or in any interstate river or river valleys. Parliament may by law provide that neither of the Supreme Court nor any other court shall exercise jurisdiction in respect of any such disputes or complaint as mentioned above. The Parliament has enacted the Interstate River Water Dispute Act 1956 for adjunction of dispute relating to water of interstate rivers and river valley thereof. In order to further streamline the adjunction of the interstate river water disputes, the Interstate River Water Dispute Bill 2017 was introduced. This table provides the detail of water sharing disputes for various river basins and concerned states. Currently, 5 water dispute tribunals are active in India. To resolve the interstate water dispute, the draft National Water Framework Bill 2016 advocates for an appropriate institutional arrangement at all levels. In such efforts, and in the event of adjunction under the Interstate Water Dispute Act 1956, if it is become necessary, the resolution of interstate river water dispute, it is not a one-time settlement but shall be recognized as a continuous process of conformity to the spirit of settlement, and ensuring this shall be among the responsibilities of the institutional arrangement referred to in subsection 1 of this section. Data of all kind needed for the purpose of subsections 1 to 3 of this section shall be freely shared by the states concerned and put in public domain for the information of all without any restriction on the ground of confidentiality or secrecy. All interstate water sharing agreement shall be reviewed periodically, even 25 to 30 years, to properly respond to and engage with the changing circumstances on the ground. It is also emphasized that water allocation has to be done in a manner that achieves economic efficiencies, social equity and environmental sustainability. Water allocation therefore makes trade-off between the priorities of stakeholders, profitability and economic returns, reliabilities of water supply, equity and substances of ecosystems.